But within this darkness lies a hidden light. Because loneliness, when surrendered to, becomes aloneness. Aloneness is not isolation. It is wholeness. It is not the pain of being unloved. It is the power of loving yourself so completely that others become an addition, not a necessity. In loneliness, your wounds bleed. In aloneness, your wounds become wisdom. In loneliness, silence feels empty. In aloneness, silence becomes sacred. In loneliness, your mind eats itself alive. In aloneness, your mind becomes your temple. This transformation does not happen quickly. It takes years. It takes dying and being reborn again and again until the part of you that fears being alone is burned away, leaving only the self that is unbreakable. Lonely minds see the world differently. They see beauty in places others overlook. The cracked wall with ivy growing through it becomes a painting of resilience. The old man feeding pigeons in silence becomes a lesson in peace. The abandoned building becomes a temple of forgotten dreams. The late-night rain on empty streets becomes music only their soul can hear. They feel sadness in laughter. They feel love in pain. They feel hope in endings. Their minds weave connections between everything, creating meaning where others see none. This is why they often become creators, healers, philosophers, poets, and visionaries, because their loneliness is the womb from which their creations are born. But society does not understand them. It praises extroversion, confidence, charm, and social dominance. It rewards those who can network, who can smile and sell, who can dance to its tunes without missing a beat. Lonely minds are told to fix themselves, to go out more, to talk more, to be more like others. But what they carry cannot be shared at noisy parties. What they feel cannot be expressed in casual conversation. Their truth is too heavy for light minds. Their depth is too terrifying for shallow hearts. Their wisdom is too raw for comfortable ears. This is why they walk alone, not out of arrogance, but out of necessity, because their soul knows that pretending to belong is the deepest loneliness of all. Better to walk alone in truth than to sit among crowds wearing masks. Better to be silent with the self than to speak words that betray it. Better to be rejected for authenticity than loved for a lie. This is the power of lonely minds. Their loneliness becomes their freedom. Their silence becomes their strength. Their solitude becomes their sovereignty. Carl Jung said that loneliness is the suffering of being unable to communicate your truth. But he also showed that this suffering births individuation. Because when you stop trying to communicate with those who cannot hear you, you begin communicating with your soul. You become your own companion, your own teacher, your own healer, your own lover, your own God. And in that sacred aloneness, you realize you were never alone. You were simply looking for yourself in others, and they could not reflect what they did not see within themselves. The psychology of lonely minds is not a pathology. It is a path of returning home to yourself, a path of dying to who the world wanted you to be and becoming who you truly are, a path of letting go of the need to be understood and choosing instead to understand yourself so deeply that others' understanding becomes irrelevant, a path of embracing the shadows within so you can walk the world without fear, a path of living in such alignment with your soul that even if the world abandons you, you remain rooted in unshakable peace. Most people will continue to run from their loneliness. They will keep themselves busy, keep themselves distracted, keep themselves asleep. But a few will sit with their loneliness, look it in the eyes, and say, "I am not afraid of you anymore." And in that moment, loneliness will dissolve, revealing the radiant truth beneath it. The truth that you are whole, the truth that you are eternal, the truth that you are enough. Comment below, "I embrace my loneliness as my teacher." Subscribe to Psychatic for more Carl Jung truths on shadow integration, loneliness, and psychological freedom. If this video spoke to your hidden pain, consider leaving a super thanks to support this channel. Share this with someone who feels alone in their mind today. Loneliness is a silent disease. It seeps into your soul without warning, wrapping its cold fingers around your mind until you can no longer tell where it ends and you begin. Most people think loneliness is about having no one around. They imagine an old man sitting by a window, watching the world go by without visitors. They imagine a woman eating dinner alone at a restaurant while couples laugh around her. But Carl Jung knew that loneliness is far deeper than physical isolation. He said, loneliness does not come from having no people around you. It comes from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you, from holding truths inside your mind that no one else understands, from carrying a reality so different from others that you start to believe something is wrong with you. Lonely minds are often the minds that think too deeply. They notice details others ignore. They see patterns others miss. They feel emotions others cannot handle. They hear the silent cries beneath polite conversations. They sense the hidden intentions behind words. They live in a world that is far more intense, far more chaotic, far more painful than what they show on their faces. Because if they spoke their truth, people would call them dramatic, negative, or crazy. So they stay silent. They keep their thoughts locked inside. They let others think they are quiet, or shy, or reserved. But inside their minds, storms rage endlessly. The psychology of lonely minds is a psychology of survival. Because to live with thoughts that have no space to be spoken is a form of imprisonment. You begin to build walls around yourself, thinking they will keep you safe from rejection. But those walls become your cage. You stop sharing your ideas because people dismiss them. You stop expressing your pain because people belittle it. You stop showing your brilliance because people feel threatened by it. You stop showing your darkness because people call it evil. So you stay alone in your mind, believing it is better to carry your truth in silence than to risk being hated for it. But what happens when a mind remains lonely for too long? Jung said the psyche needs connection, just as the body needs food. When the mind remains in isolation, it begins to turn on itself. Thoughts loop endlessly, repeating the same fears, the same regrets, the same what-ifs. The mind becomes a prison of its own making. A lonely mind becomes suspicious of the world. It begins to believe no one can be trusted. It begins to see danger in every kindness, betrayal in every love, rejection in every silence. The longer it stays alone, the more it feeds on itself, like a snake eating its own tail. Yet, there is another side to the psychology of lonely minds. Jung believed that loneliness, when faced with courage, can become the birthplace of transformation. Because in that silence, with no one to mirror you, you begin to see yourself clearly. You see your pain, your wounds, your shadows. You see the parts of you that are hidden from the world, the parts you have abandoned to keep your masks intact. In that silence, your illusions die, your fantasies dissolve, your ego cracks, and what remains is your naked soul, trembling in its rawness, but finally real. Most people spend their entire lives avoiding loneliness. They fill every empty space with distractions. Music, television, scrolling endlessly through images of other people's lives. Constant chatter with friends who do not understand them. They cling to toxic relationships because the pain of abuse feels safer than the pain of being alone. They stay in places that drain them because the silence of walking away feels unbearable. They fear loneliness because it shows them their truth. But lonely minds who have walked through this darkness without running discover something others never will. They discover that loneliness is not the absence of love. It is the absence of self. Because when you truly meet yourself in that silence, you realize that you were never alone. Your soul was always there, waiting for you to notice it, waiting for you to turn inward instead of outward, waiting for you to stop seeking validation, love, acceptance, belonging from others who cannot even give these things to themselves, waiting for you to understand that the mind that is lonely is the mind that is disconnected from its own truth. Once you reconnect with who you truly are, the loneliness begins to dissolve, because you are no longer living in a world that rejects you. You are living in your own world, where you belong to yourself completely. But this journey is painful, because to reach this place, you must face every illusion you built to survive. You must admit that the friends you had were never real, that the love you chased was never love, that the validation you received was never truth, that your identity was built on other people's expectations, You must grieve the life you thought you had. You must grieve the person you pretended to be. You must grieve the connections that were built on lies. Only then can you build a life rooted in your soul. Lonely minds carry an ancient wisdom. They are often the thinkers, the philosophers, the artists, the poets, the healers, the seers. Their minds travel to places others fear to enter. They live at the edge of existence, seeing realities that remain invisible to the distracted masses. This is why they are lonely, because the price of seeing deeply is walking alone. The price of feeling deeply is carrying pain others deny. The price of knowing deeply is isolation from the world that fears truth. But this isolation is not a punishment. It is a purification. It is a sacred initiation into a life that is real. A life where your mind is no longer a prison, but a temple. A life where your thoughts are no longer chains, but wings. A life where you are no longer desperate to be understood because you have understood yourself. A life where you can sit in silence without feeling empty because your soul fills every corner of your being with its presence. This is the true psychology of lonely minds. They are not broken. They are simply awake in a world that is sleeping. When Carl Jung spoke about loneliness, he was not speaking about social isolation alone. He was speaking about the deep, existential loneliness that comes when a person awakens to their own consciousness. This loneliness has nothing to do with how many friends you have or how loved you are. It is the loneliness of standing on the edge of human understanding, looking into truths that others are too afraid to see. It is the loneliness of carrying thoughts so heavy and vast that if you spoke them aloud, people would stare at you with confusion or mock you with laughter. And so, you remain silent, holding galaxies within you that no one will ever visit. Lonely minds often belong to those who woke up too soon. As children, they noticed the hypocrisy in their parents' words, the anger hidden behind their smiles, the fear behind their discipline, the sadness behind their demands for obedience. They noticed the cruelty of other children and wondered why no one stopped it. They noticed the pain in animals and trees and rivers and felt a guilt they did not understand. They saw life with eyes unfiltered by denial. They felt emotions with a rawness that made them seem too sensitive, too dramatic, too intense for others to handle. So people told them to toughen up, to grow thicker skin, to stop thinking so much, to stop feeling so deeply. But you cannot unsee what you see. You cannot unknow what you know. You can only pretend. And in that pretending, loneliness was born. Because when you begin to pretend, you build a false self. A self that fits in. A self that says what others want to hear. A self that hides its depth to avoid rejection. But inside you, the real self watches silently, screaming for freedom. This split creates an unbearable loneliness. You are surrounded by people. but no one knows you. They love the mask, not the soul. They admire your roles, not your truth. They praise your obedience, not your rebellion. Every compliment given to your mask becomes a wound to your soul, because your soul knows it is invisible to them, and there is no loneliness deeper than being unseen by those closest to you. Lonely minds begin to withdraw. At first, they withdraw in small ways, saying less in conversations, laughing politely at jokes that feel empty, nodding in agreement while their mind floats into distant thoughts, spending more time in their rooms, taking longer walks alone, sitting silently in classrooms, workplaces, cafes, parties, feeling like a ghost watching humans perform their rituals. Eventually, their withdrawal becomes total. They no longer seek connection. They no longer try to explain their truth. They no longer hope to be understood. They become silent islands surrounded by an ocean of noise. The world calls them antisocial, introverted, weird, arrogant, depressed. But they are not any of these things. They are simply tired of trying to fit into a world that feels alien to their soul. Yet there is a sacred beauty to this loneliness, because when you are no longer distracted by shallow connections, your mind turns inward. You begin to see parts of yourself you never knew existed. You begin to explore the caverns of your psyche, discovering hidden fears, secret desires, ancient wounds, forgotten dreams. You begin to hear the voice of your intuition, a voice that was drowned out by other people's opinions. You begin to feel the presence of something greater than yourself moving through your thoughts. Jung called this the self, the totality of who you are beyond ego, beyond persona, beyond conditioning. In loneliness, you begin to touch this self, and for the first time, you feel at home within yourself. But this path is not easy, because before you reach yourself, you must pass through your shadows. You must meet the parts of you that you buried in shame, the rage you suppressed to stay good, the jealousy you denied to stay moral, the lust you repressed to stay pure, the grief you ignored to stay strong, the fear you hid to stay brave. These shadows come to you in the silence of loneliness, whispering truths you do not want to hear. They show you how you betrayed yourself to be loved, how you abandoned yourself to belong, how you silenced yourself to stay safe. They break your illusions one by one until you are left naked before your own soul. Most people run from this. They call friends, they drink alcohol, they binge-watch shows, they drown in social media, they jump from relationship to relationship, anything to avoid meeting their shadows. Because loneliness with shadows feels like torture. But lonely minds who have the courage to stay, who do not run, who sit with their darkness and listen to its painful truths, they awaken into a power others cannot imagine. Because on the other side of loneliness is freedom. On the other side of shadow is integration. On the other side of emptiness is wholeness. These minds become different. They no longer crave validation. They no longer seek shallow friendships. They no longer fear rejection. They live from a place of silent confidence, rooted deeply in their own truth. They can sit alone for hours without feeling lonely, because they are in the company of their soul. They can watch the world move around them without feeling left out, because their life is happening within them. They can stand alone in their beliefs without flinching, because their truth is no longer up for negotiation. They become warriors of solitude, carrying an aura of silent strength that others feel but cannot name. The psychology of lonely minds is the psychology of transformation, because only in loneliness can the illusions of the world fall away. Only in loneliness can the ego die. Only in loneliness can the self be born. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And to become who you truly are, you must be willing to stand alone, because the path to yourself is not crowded. It is narrow, dark, silent, and terrifying. But it leads to a freedom so profound that once you taste it, you will never again trade your solitude for the comfort of false belonging." Loneliness has shaped some of the greatest minds in history. It carved out spaces within them where ordinary thoughts could not reach. Nietzsche spent years in isolation, writing truths too terrifying for society to accept. Jung spent decades diving into his dreams and symbols alone in his tower at Bollingen. Buddha left his kingdom to sit alone under a tree for years until he saw through the illusions of the world. Christ walked into the desert for 40 days, alone with his temptations and fears, to emerge carrying light beyond human comprehension. All wisdom is born in loneliness, because only loneliness strips away the noise of the world long enough for truth to be heard. But loneliness is not romantic. It is not the curated solitude you see on social media with cups of coffee and books by the window. It is raw. It is brutal. It is nights of silent screaming into your pillow because there is no one to hear you. It is mornings of waking up to silence so deafening it feels like a punishment. It is afternoons spent staring at the ceiling, wondering if your life will ever mean anything. It is walking through crowded streets, feeling invisible. It is sitting among friends, laughing, and feeling like a ghost haunting your own life. It is lying in bed with someone you love and feeling a distance that no touch can cross. It is the soul knowing it is alone, even in the arms of the world.